start the meeting.
I don't think your sound is on strong.
Mr. Bond, would you tell us what you're here tonight about and about
Yeah, definitely. Welcome everyone to the joint session of the City Council and Planning Commission. The topic of tonight's meeting is a progress report on the 2016 Comprehensive Plan update. I'm Nick Bond, I'm the Development Director for the city, and I'm here tonight with some staff. Scott Bonjukian, who has been an intern for the city and started with this project as a student in the UW Master's Studio, and is a local resident of Port Orchard. And then Elle Davis is our associate planner. She's been here about 6 months and has begun working on this project as well. I also, before we get too involved, I wanted to let everybody know how this meeting came about. Council at a work study meeting several months ago had a discussion on public involvement and the comprehensive plan. We had started taking some of the draft elements of the plan through the Planning Commission for an initial public hearing to get comments and feedback on the draft documents, and there was some concern that not enough discussion had taken place with the public, and we wanted to, the mayor and I got together to try and figure out how we could provide this information to the public in an efficient way that was fit within the workload of the department, which we're very busy these days. But we're doing our best to ensure full public participation in the comp plan process. Tonight, we're going to talk about the work that's been done to date, as I mentioned. The goals and policies in the draft plan element I'd like to discuss at the next workshop, where we're going to be in more of a roundtable setting, and I envision the Council and Planning Commission sitting around at tables here on the floor and really going through sort of the elements of the comprehensive plan and the goals and policies, and being able to ask questions about specific goals and discuss those goals and policies as they relate to state mandates and also citizen feedback that's been received. And so between tonight and the next meeting, if you haven't already had an opportunity to read the draft documents, which are online, I would encourage you to do so. I have gotten specific feedback from some of you, and I would encourage you all to come with any notes or questions that you have about the document to that meeting, and we'll go through it in chronological order. But for tonight, we're really giving an overview of the process. Also for the public, if you haven't had a chance to see the draft documents, they are available online, and the address will be at the end of the PowerPoint presentation here. I think it's also in the handout that it's not on the handout, but it is on the city website for the Department of Community Development. If you have any trouble finding it, feel free to contact the office and we'll provide it to you. So for tonight's agenda, we'll start with a presentation on where we are in the process, and then we'll dive into some of the details on the work that's been done so far and summarize what's ahead of us. It should take less than an hour, and afterwards I'd like to open this up for questions from elected officials and planning commissioners, and then also the public. I think that we really want to focus the discussion to the comprehensive plan. If there are issues in the city that are related to the plan, feel free to bring them up, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that people have, and if we don't have the answer, we can certainly take down information and get back to you. At its core, the comprehensive plan is about what people value in Port Orchard. We're a growing city, but we're still a small town at heart, and we have a unique maritime history and community spirit. When you see Port Orchard on a postcard or on a map, the town is seen as having a relationship with the shipyard across the water and the ground and water transportation that links that connect us with the greater Puget Sound region. The plan is about maintaining and enhancing these and other qualities of Port Orchard. The plan also shows how the city can change for the better and accommodate growth before it happens. From past versions of the plan and from hearing from what a number of people want, we've learned more about what Port Orchard citizens desire. Residents want better access to local shopping in town. There's continued support for improving the downtown waterfront. People want more transportation options beyond driving, and they're interested in making Port Orchard a vibrant business hub that is competitive with the rest of the region. These are all big ideas that take a long time to implement. The scope of this plan is the next 20 years through 2036. We're also updating the plan to fulfill legal requirements. Most cities and counties in Washington maintain a comprehensive plan, and they have options to make minor amendments every year. However, every 8 years, we have a mandate to more fully update the plan. All of the jurisdictions in Kitsap County have a June 30th, 2016 deadline to complete their comprehensive plan update. The purpose of this is to reflect on the changes that have happened and continually prepare for the future. It also allows us to make sure the plan is consistent with new rules and make sure nothing is left out that the law requires. The Puget Sound Regional Council has a larger plan for the Seattle metropolitan area called Vision 2040. Vision 2040 aims to unify the region mainly through economic development and transportation investment at the regional level. It also depends on local jurisdictions to implement the broad goals of the vision at the local level through land use planning. In order to qualify for federal transportation money, our comprehensive plan needs to be certified by Puget Sound Regional Council and be consistent with Vision 2040. The comprehensive plan translates into real action where it filters down into our local land use and development codes and into the city budget. Making sure that the city's development regulations, plan, and budget are consistent is also required by state law. So in addition, the city is a member of the KRCC, and I know that several council members attend those meetings on a regular basis, and I believe council members Ashby and is it Mayor Mathis or Mayor Mathis are our representatives to KRCC at this point in time, and I think a few people also attend the PSRC meetings. The KRCC's responsibilities include developing countywide planning policies which implement the Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2040. The regional growth strategy, which was developed to accommodate the 5 million people coming to the 4-county region by 2040, includes a 9% allocation to Kitsap County. That means that 9% of the region's growth for the 40-year period we're required to plan for as a county. And then the KRCC takes that allocation and divides it up among the various jurisdictions, whether it's Paulsbo, Bainbridge Island, the city, or Bremerton. This graph here is directly from Vision 2040. It's a little bit difficult to read, but the orange areas there show by city size. There's metropolitan cities, core cities, larger cities, small cities, and then incorporated UGA, and then rural areas. And it shows the breakdown of how much growth is supposed to go to each of those areas. In Vision 2040, and this is prior to Port Orchard annexing the Bethel Corridor or McCormick Woods, between Paulsbo and us, who are the two small cities for our county, we had to accommodate 12,000 people. When the city annexed the additional areas, our allocation increased because the amount of land available for the urban UGA, urban growth boundary in Pierce County, decreased. And so we ended up with a population allocation that basically said through 2036, we've got to accommodate 8,235 additional residents in the city. This number has already been ratified. It's not appealable. It's not negotiable at this point unless the KRCC were to open this up and all of the cities were to agree to change the number. So this is really an input into the plan that we have to work within, and our plan basically has to ensure that it, by 2036, we have taken all the steps necessary to accommodate this growth. And whether this growth happens or not, it may come in under 8,000, it may come in over 8,000, but we have to, at a minimum, plan for 8,000 to do our share in handling the region's growth. In addition, there's employment allocations, which are part of the KRCC allocations, and we have to plan for an additional 3,100 jobs within the city, presumably for those new residents, although they possibly could be filled by residents from other communities, and our citizens could also work elsewhere. So in short, by 2036, which is the planning horizon for the comp plan, we could be a city of 21,000 people and 10,000 jobs. And all of the assumptions throughout our entire plan have to take into account those numbers at a minimum. So as a sort of rigid input into the process, that sort of leads us into our existing plan and the various elements and chapters that are contained therein. Where the city has a lot of say and as the community input is sought is really to talk about what this growth is going to look like. We know that we have to plan for it, but the community can have a lot of say as far as what form it takes. The current plan contains 11 chapters, or what the state refers to as elements. They include introduction, land use, housing, economic development, transportation, and the others that you see on the slide. As for a timeline, and I think this is a little more visible on the big screen, we started this process in January of 2014, and that was when the 2014 budget started, which council had budgeted some money to hire students from the University of Washington to come help with public outreach. And so if you attended a workshop in the fall or spring of 2014, you probably met with some students who really did an excellent job of capturing the citizens and business owners' needs and wants for the community, and we went through a number of exercises to talk about how Port Orchard is going to grow. We've continued reviewing the work that the students started. They delivered 3 draft elements to the city, and we've taken those through the Planning Commission process. We've also, late last year, we drafted an economic development update, and we got some feedback from KEDA and did a citizen survey to try and inform that particular element of the plan. But right now, we essentially have an introduction in 3 out of the 11 elements drafted, with the remaining elements currently underway, and we plan on having a similar presentation to this for the remaining elements later on this summer or early in the fall, prior to taking those forward for public hearings one by one at the Planning Commission, followed by, once we've sort of massaged the details of all of the elements, we'll assemble them into one document and bring that forward for a full public hearing as a unified document. So, right now, we're about a little more than halfway through the process, and as I mentioned earlier, the deadline for this project is July 2016. We have consultants helping us with the transportation, water and sewer elements, as well as a best available science update that includes a look at the city's critical areas code. Those efforts are all underway, and we'll be doing some public outreach this summer concerning those items. But what we're here to talk about tonight is the work that has been done to date. So since the start of the process, we've been transparent and open to many different stakeholders. We've hosted 3 large public meetings in the last year that saw good turnout and good feedback and ideas for the plan. We also talked to business owners and a variety of local organizations. We've conducted various surveys, conducted public hearings on the draft elements prepared to date, and we're not done talking to stakeholders yet. This meeting tonight is one example of that, and we're going to continue to work with the community to make sure that your voices are heard and that the plan reflects what you think Port Orchard should strive for. Keep in mind, everyone has different ideas, and our job is to produce a plan that is the best of all worlds and reflects the values as much as everyone can agree on. So I'm going to get into the introduction element, which is the first of the 4 elements that have been drafted. And the introduction element goes beyond just saying what Port Orchard is, but it presents a vision for what the city is going to be in 20 years. It gives a brief history of the city and explains how the final comprehensive plan will be organized. Like everything else we're showing you tonight, it's a draft and will be finalized before we submit everything to the state for review. The introduction contains a lot of facts and figures about the city and what's happened recently. This image is in the plan, although I think we're going to update it because the 2010 census data is starting to become a little bit out of date, and there's some new numbers we can insert. But it shows key statistics about the community, and I just want to note that the city's population most recently was estimated at 13,150 by OFM, and we should have a new estimate within the next month or two. I think they release April numbers, but it takes them a month or 2 to get those out. So we'll be looking for those, and we'll put the most current number in the plan. I also wanted to note that the city, we have new GIS data, and we measured, and we're at 9.67 square miles. And like I said before, we've almost doubled in size in the last 5 or 6 years from what we used to be. So the next figure here, actually, I didn't show you this before because I was about to show you it. This is the map showing the existing city boundary, or the previous city boundary in gray, and the extent of the annexations that have occurred in the last number of years. And one of the reasons this is a more comprehensive overhaul of the comprehensive plan is that the old plan didn't reflect the annexation of these areas. The plan was amended to include land use maps and other things, but it doesn't have maybe the same level of public involvement because those residents weren't there at the time that we did our last major update. And so, and then also things like transportation plans, water sewer plans need to be updated to really understand what's going on in these new areas of the city. So the other contents of this introduction chapter, and I wanted to go through the specifics of this section because I think they're really important and very well written, and these were produced by the students from feedback received by, or from the feedback they received from the community. But the vision includes targeted outcomes, and these are statements that in 2036 we want to be able to say are true, and I'm going to read these to everyone. The city has retained its small town character and its strong community spirit. The historic downtown is more attractive and vibrant. More efficient patterns of development have reduced real per capita infrastructure costs. Housing has remained affordable and the diversity of housing types has expanded. Walking, biking, driving, and transit infrastructure make it easy to get around the city. The city's waterfront and open space resources are highly enjoyed by the community. Community organizations are better empowered to coordinate events and activities. Citizens enjoy a comfortable and productive relationship with city government. Local businesses are supported by the community and government policies. Citizens are better informed and connected to the planning process. And so and if anyone has questions about any of the issues I bring up, feel free to stop me. But I guess I'd like to, I hope that captures sort of what people would like to see out of the city. I think those points are pretty well written, and you know, I would definitely encourage you to ask questions about these if you have them at the end of the meeting or now. So in the introduction, the next major theme was the theme of connections. And one thing that we heard over and over again related to connectivity one way or another, whether it was connecting people to their government, the government to businesses, connecting the park systems to neighborhoods, transportation connections. You know, that was one of the major takeaways that we had from the process in the public involvement, was this need to be connected in every way in the city. And so we're trying to ensure that this theme sort of filters down to all of the different elements in the plan and reflects that overall priority. The other key theme that we discussed in the land use element, which we'll discuss later in the land use element, is the center's strategy. And during the public workshops that we held in the planning process, we had an exercise where we took those numbers from the countywide planning policies, the 8,235 people we have to plan for, and we asked residents, you know, where do you want these people to go? And we had we had a big map and a table, and people sat around the table and kind of said, this is where I want things to happen. And we actually provided them with, for instance, McCormick West is a project that is vested, and we provided them and said, you know, there's 4,000 people that are supposed to live in McCormick West, and so you can subtract half of the people you have to allocate, but how would you like to distribute the rest of them? And one approach that we discussed, which is kind of on one extreme, is the peanut butter approach, where you just spread the growth evenly across the city, and your zoning regulations sort of reflect that and ensure that everybody takes a little bit of the growth. The other alternative would have been to stack everybody into one part of the city and say that we want all of our growth to go here so that nothing changes in other parts in the existing neighborhoods. And this process led to what we're calling our centers approach, our local centers approach to accommodating this growth. And the local centers approach is essentially an all of the above approach, but we'll get to that more in the land use element. Finally, I'd like to talk about the organization of the document. Previously, we just had every chapter kind of went in order. There was an introduction, land use, and then housing, and I forget how it went. But we created this illustration to really reflect the themes that have been identified in the plan, and sort of the introduction and the vision kind of are the umbrella and everything else is underneath. But the land use element is the heart of the plan because it identifies what uses are going to go where, and then that sort of informs all of the other parts of the plan. And as the draft elements are released, you only have housing and economic development coming out of land use at this point, but you'll see that those elements really reflect this land use strategy first, the centers approach, and this idea of creating connections throughout the community. So moving on to the land use element, this is the core chapter of the comprehensive plan, and we considered it to be sort of the heart of the plan, as I mentioned. The land use chapter can be summed up as the document that guides the various uses throughout the city and also the creation of the city's development regulations and zoning map. State law requires that the city's development regulations be consistent with the land use element, and so typically when you update your land use element, you also follow it up with updates to the zoning code and other development regulations to make sure that the two are consistent. It should be noted that we haven't actually proposed any changes to the land use map as part of the update, and we also haven't proposed any changes to the overlay districts that exist. We currently have overlay districts for the downtown area, which is a set of zoning regulations which kind of overlie the existing commercial and mixed-use zones and add additional standards. It's not that we don't think that there's room for improvement, it's that conducting those updates as part of this process is really difficult. I think what we're trying to do now is identify the need to do planning in certain areas of the city as opposed to actually doing that planning as part of this process, and that's mostly due to the constraints of our department with having only 3 staff and having quite a few development applications coming in, and the goal is to identify what things need to be prioritized and updated through the plan and through the goals and policies contained therein. As far as the zoning map goes, this graph kind of shows the map on a percentage basis of what uses are identified, and I think the key here is that most of the city is designated medium density residential, and it's zoned for 8 units per acre, and that's it looks like almost 50% of the city is zoned that way, with all of the other uses sharing the remaining land, and I don't think that that's really going to change unless the community comes out and says they want it to change, which we haven't heard as of yet. The other thing that I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation was we have this population allocation, and so we're required to demonstrate that we have sufficient land capacity to accommodate those 8,235 people that the region thinks are going to come to Port Orchard, or at least that we're doing our share to help accommodate the regional growth allocation. So Kitsap County worked with the cities and all the jurisdictions in the county to develop a buildable lands report. This report looked at our existing zoning, critical areas, and recent development to determine how much vacant land was left and how much redevelopable land was left, and that would be a situation where you have a small older house on a large piece of property that could be redeveloped. And they looked at the zoning and said how many units per acre can be developed, and then multiplied by our persons per household estimate, which is about 2.5 in the current plan, and said that you essentially have capacity for 12,000 people, and you only have to accommodate 8,200. So the good news is that we have enough land to accommodate our population allocation. But this, of course, means that in order to accommodate that growth, things are going to get more crowded in the city, and density is going to increase. This is our existing land use map, and it's a little small for, at least on my screen, but you can see this on the wall down in the planning department. And like I said, we haven't proposed any changes to this map as part of the update, but as we do some sub-area planning in the future as part of the center strategy, or look to update downtown overlay district regulations or Tremont overlay district regulations, it may be necessary to make some amendments to this, but at this point none are proposed. So as I mentioned before, the local centers approach is one of the themes, and that was the way that the public who has participated to this point thought that the city ought to allocate those 8,200 people. And so you can see there, that's the map that they were working with, and they had little pieces that represented growth and spread them around on the map to determine how should the city handle this. And essentially, people said, areas that contain existing approved developments, those developments are going to happen and will take up some of this growth allocation. Some of this needs to be spread around to existing vacant lots, and infill development will occur, or if there's a couple of large parcels that are surrounded by existing neighborhoods, they might develop. And then finally, they wanted to send some growth to clusters within the city that would become more cohesive local centers where you might have pedestrian-oriented businesses and some mixed-use type development in commercial areas. And so the community identified that as a priority. And as I said, the objectives of the center's approach are the efficient provision of public services. And so obviously if you concentrate some of your development into small clusters, that's more residents per foot of sewer line per road, and generally is going to lower the cost of providing services to those areas. They include livable, walkable, mixed-use places, housing and shopping variety, and multiple transportation options. And ideally, any center that would get planned would include connections to the nearby parks that exist. There would be bike lanes or trails or other ways to connect these various centers so that people can walk more freely in the community. The center's strategy ties into the countywide planning policies, which recognizes important local centers at the regional planning level. It also ties into the city's infrastructure planning efforts, which are currently underway as the city works to identify needed transportation and utilities improvements. So in 2014, last year, the council approved just a base map for local centers, and the purpose of that was the KRCC at the time was talking about updating one of the appendices in their countywide planning policies to update the list of local centers. And Port Orchard currently only has 3 local centers on that list, and that list was created before we annexed any of the areas of Bethel or McCormick Woods. And one of the things that was brought up is that in other county regional planning frameworks, local jurisdictions, when they apply for a transportation grant, they get bonus points on the grant application if the project is serving a locally identified center. And so the idea was we needed to capture some of our larger infrastructure projects in these centers, and that way if points were available in a grant application, we might score better and get some things funded so that we don't have to pay for them with local funds. So anyway, this map was adopted, but there's no special plans for any of these areas, and the goal out of the land use element would be to write brief sub-area plans for each of these areas to identify what citizens want to see happen in those individual areas. And some of the areas, like the county government campus up the hill or the medical complex along Tremont, there are already plans in existence, and maybe those just need a light update, whereas other areas like Sedgwick and Bethel, we've only recently annexed it. There's no plan in existence for what's going to happen in that area, and so maybe the discussion needs to happen in the next couple of years after the plan is approved. So moving on, the housing element is the next element, and fortunately, this is a shorter element, and so that means I'm getting close to being finished here. The intent of the housing element is to guide decisions that affect the availability and affordability of housing. That's straight out of the Growth Management Act. It also, it's important to recognize trends in housing. One of the things that we're observing is that persons per household size is going down. And part of that is annexing McCormick Woods, where you have more 2-person households than we had in the rest of the community. But as a whole, the region is seeing declining household size. And so therefore, to accommodate more people, the number of houses we have to accommodate may be higher in the future than it is today. And finally, then there's other housing goals and policies that are in this element, and I think we're going to get into those at the next meeting. As far as highlights of the update, the goals and policies focus on preserving existing neighborhoods and increasing housing options, exploring the demands for affordable and special needs housing, establishing goals for an efficient permitting process, establishing goals to ensure that development protects and maintains the environment. Those are kind of the general themes, and a lot of those are coming straight out of state law or the checklist that we have to submit with our plan when we go to get it certified. The economic development element has recently been drafted. I think we took that to the Planning Commission over the winter. We have met with at least one council member to discuss the contents of this. We also had a very productive meeting with KEDA as we drafted the element. So we have some revisions proposed that are on the shelf, but we want to give the rest of the council an opportunity to weigh in on this. And so we'll have a lengthy discussion on Thursday night about the goals and policies of this element. The primary issue is that we have to accommodate the 3,132 jobs in the city, which is our share of the region's employment growth. And so the goals and policies need to support that. The goals and policies generally have been written to support a variety of employment types, to retain and attract business, to market Port Orchard as a destination, to identify investments and needed improvements in support of economic development, and to support local business. We also looked at industrial employment and opportunities for economic development, and when we did our survey and our public outreach, the conclusion was that there really aren't any viable areas aside from our existing industrial park for that type of development, though I do remember it being mentioned that possibly some very light craft type things could occur in some of our existing commercial areas, but further discussion I think is needed on that particular issue. But anyway, whoops, and sorry, I forgot to flip my slides. Anyway, the conclusion was that the majority of industrial jobs are going to locate at SKIA, which, if you didn't know, has been renamed to the Puget Sound Industrial Park? No.
Center.
Industrial Center.
Industrial
It's not.
Center.
It doesn't roll off the tongue like SKIA did, but anyway, they've renamed it, but that's sort of where we see a lot of future citizens in Port Orchard potentially working, though there's still going to have to be jobs in Port Orchard, or we're going to at least have to have enough land to support those jobs. As far as the other elements which are not yet drafted, we're currently working on transportation, parks, water and sewer, natural systems, and the capital facilities plan, and we'll kind of go through those real quickly. The city is contracted with TSI Inc. for updating the transportation plan. It's a very technical document that involves traffic modeling and identifying the capacity of our existing roadways. The city's also currently working on a 2015 update to its transportation improvement plan, and so that is going to be going forward to the Planning Commission as a comprehensive plan amendment, and then the council also has to take action on that before July this year, and so that we're doing a substantial overhaul of the TIP, and that will in turn inform the transportation plan that TSI is working on. One of the major things that has to be in your comprehensive plan is adopting a level of service for traffic, and basically the current standard in the Port Orchard Code is a level of service D, and that has to do with essentially how much time you spend waiting at a stoplight before you're able to go, or how much time you're stuck in traffic. Some cities go to a level of service F, others go to a level of service C. Very rarely do you see a level of service A or B, because that usually stops any development from happening, because developers have to put in so many improvements in order to accommodate the impacts of their projects. So anyway, we probably propose to stay with a level of service D, though we really need to understand through modeling what's going on with traffic at all times of the day, and our consultant will come up with some recommendations there. As far as local maintenance projects, which I know a lot of the citizens are concerned with, when we do the transportation plan, we're primarily looking at capital projects for improving the capacity of the system. The maintenance issues, I think, are probably where the public is most interested in participating as far as maintenance of public roads. And so when the element comes out for public participation and we seek public input, that'll be a large component of that, is identifying how we're going to go about maintaining our existing roads and prioritizing investment. Finally, the transportation element is required per state law to have a non-motorized element, so this will be identifying network of potential bike lanes and paths and other sidewalk improvements that are needed to sort of complete the city and make it walkable. And so that's a small element, but an important one, and those projects can be identified then in the capital facilities plan of the city. The next element is parks, and city staff, L is actually taking on a light revision to the parks plan, which was completed in 2011, and so fortunately it's fairly up to date and reflects a lot of the annexation activity that has taken place, though not all of it. The one emphasis, we're going to be doing a survey soon using our new MindMixer software survey, and also just soliciting general ideas that people are going to be able to go online and click that they rate this idea with 5 stars or 1 stars, and it's a way to really gauge the public support for citizen ideas. So look for that to be out soon. But we're really interested in finding out what people want to do with some of the undeveloped parkland in the city, whether we should prioritize developing our undeveloped parks or whether we should put money into existing parks to make them better. And we'll be taking that under advisement as we update the plan and identify the projects that are going to go forward. And so that project's being done entirely in-house, and my goal is to have that by the end of summer would be ideal. We've also contracted with Pace Engineering for a water system plan update. This needs to be updated in large part due to the recent annexations and also the changes in our growth allocations, because we really haven't done a good job of identifying what water projects are needed to serve the level of growth that we're expected to plan for. It's a really technical document. It's subject to Department of Health review. There is public participation involved, but there's not a lot of flexibility when it comes to what you're doing with your water system. Executive summary, essentially what's going to come out of the water plan is a standalone document that gets updated. There's an executive summary that'll go into the comprehensive plan that covers all the required comp plan elements, and then there's a capital facilities element which will go into the capital facilities portion of the plan. And the same is true of sewer, except that we're using our sewer consultant BHC for that work. And they're on the same sort of timeline, and we've actually got them talking, they're sharing data and trying to make this cost less for the city. Finally, the last requirement from state law is that we review best available science. And essentially this involves, in Port Orchard, we have a natural systems element of our comp plan, and we have a critical areas code that's part of the development regulations. And so every 8 years, the state wants you to look at recent reports, what species have been delisted or listed as endangered species, and make sure that if you have those types of areas in your city, they're identified. It's not a fun part of the job, but it's important for protecting the environment, and again, we have to provide that documentation to Commerce in order for them to approve our plan. And then lastly, once all of the other elements are done, we'll work with the City Council and Planning Commission to really identify what projects need to go into a capital facilities plan for future funding. And one of the things that the city has not always done, and I know that the Treasurer, Alan Martin, and Mark and I have been working on, is really trying to do longer range planning for capital investments and figuring out when road projects are going to happen, when sewer projects are going to happen, and actually adopting those into the comprehensive plan, because state law actually requires that your budget be consistent with your comprehensive plan. And so if you lay out the 6 years worth of projects that are going to be done, council has to amend that plan or fund it, essentially. And so it's a way to really line up the projects and actually do them, as opposed to sometimes, I guess, pushing them down the road, which tends to happen, especially in small cities when there are greater budget challenges. Finally, implementation. The plan is really implemented in through 3 ways: through the operating budget, the capital budget, and through updating the city's development regulations to ensure that they're consistent with the plan. So even after the plan is approved, we still have work to do, and it's not that this thing goes on the shelf, it's that the city is obligated to make sure that its development regulations are consistent with the plan. And if the city, there's appeals and other things that can happen if the city doesn't do that, but it's sometimes the ball gets dropped on that, and I think that it's a lot of work for a department our size, and it's going to be challenging for us to do all of that work. But the goal is to prioritize this in a way that it's not due the day after we pass the plan, that the plan says that this is kind of our the steps that we're going to take to implement this plan, and we're going to start one by one looking at the centers and planning for them. We're going to look at streamlining the development regulations for the downtown overlay district or any other goals that might be formally adopted. And so that just brings us back to the timeline, and we're a little more than a year away from having to have this plan adopted and certified. Ideally, this needs to be done in January of 2016, and so we have to send it to Commerce for a 60-day review, and we probably need to leave a little bit of cushion in case there's revisions or other things that need to happen. So the goal is to get this to the Planning Commission in November, December, get it to council in January to where they can just make a motion to send it to Commerce, and then Commerce may come back with comments, or they may say that it's approved, and then council can actually adopt the document. And so our next steps, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I'd be happy to take council member and planning commissioner comments, and then we can follow that with some comments from the public, and I'm happy to hand out the microphone to anyone that wishes to speak. And then finally, next Thursday, we're going to have a joint workshop where we can actually go through the goals and policies in the plan and really talk about what they mean and whether council agrees that the feedback from the public has been accurately, I guess, written down into the plan, and that they agree with those policies and think that they're a good idea. And so the reason to have the joint meeting too is that the Planning Commission often has to take on these projects without hearing instructions directly from council. So it's really an opportunity for the Planning Commission to really understand what council wants, take the project to the Planning Commission and kick it around and make some revisions and send something better back to the City Council that the City Council ultimately can approve. And hopefully we won't have to have it go to the council and then back to the Planning Commission for further revisions. But that's where we're at in the process, and I'm happy to take council member Planning Commission questions. And there's the web address for the comprehensive plan, just the City of Port Orchard website, and one link there. So I guess if there's no questions from City Council or Planning Commission, does the public have any questions for me? Or have any comments on the plan that they'd like to share with the City Council or myself?
I have a question and then a comment.
Question is pretty simple. Are you going to post these PowerPoints somewhere where they will be accessible?
Yes, they'll be on the website in the next day or two. We only finish it today.
Okay, second, and I would caution you not to use McCormick Woods as your standard for calculating household size, because the data will indicate, if you examine it, that household size is correlated to socioeconomic status. And when you're building 8 houses per acre, you're building fairly low-income housing. And you will, at low-income housing, you're talking something like 4.2 persons per household or even more. So you need to consider that. McCormick Woods is not your standard here.
And I just want to make sure you got notes.
Thank you. My name is Bill Simmons. I live at 3338 Baker Road Southeast in Port Orchard. I have a letter here from my neighbor. My daughter lives in her house. We're being impacted by a ULID that's coming into our area. ULID has come into our area because of the expansion of the UGA in South Kitsap County. I'd like to read this letter from Ms. Loretta Anderson. It's short, but it gets to the point. It addresses some of your figures here. The figures, according to the KRCC, the projected population growth for the City of Port Orchard 2010 was 12,323. The projection for 2035 is 20,558, which is an 8,235 population increase. For Port Orchard urban growth area in 2010, it was 15,044. The projection for 2035 is 21,279, increase of 6,235. Total increase of 14,470 people. McCormick Woods has 2,211 acres that are zoned for developing 4 to 9 ERUs, building lots per acre, and 78 acres zoned for 10 to 18 ERUs per acre. This is a minimum of 7,505 units, or holding 15,010 people at only 2 people per unit. The maximum number of units would be over 21,303 units. Multiplied by 2 people would equal over 40,000 people. A December 2012 report showed the Port Orchard UGA had a net 129 developable acres with a population capacity of 2,736 people. The City of Port Orchard had 202 vacant acres in 2005 with a population capacity of 2,858. Altogether, that's enough homes for over 20,000 at a minimum and over 40,000 at a maximum. Loretta says she only used 2 people per home to get these projections, yet the projection is only 14,470. The point she's trying to make is that it seems a more comprehensive study should be done on what is actually available for housing. Maybe the UGA needs to be reduced once again, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Loretta Anderson, thank you.
Just for everyone's information, the city, we can work with Kitsap County on issues of UGA, but we don't have the power to reduce it. We could certainly apply, but I'm not even sure that we can apply. I think it has to be the landowners that apply for the reduction, unless Kitsap County shows that they have a surplus of land and have to contract somewhere. And also for the persons per household question, I wanted to mention, the one thing, there are 4,000 additional homes that are vested to be built at McCormick Woods if that project is fully developed. So a lot of the development that's going to occur may happen at those same densities, but I think the other thing is we don't have minimum, or we have minimum lot sizes, but the developments that we're seeing right now, including one large subdivision that has come in, are significantly above the 8 units per acre density. The development community just isn't finding that 8 units per acre is penciling for single-family houses. It's not marketable, and so we'll look into the persons per household issue, though.
McCormick Woods certainly isn't the only area.
My name is Matt Murphy. I'm the Executive Director for the Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce. And it's nice not to have the little green, red, and yellow light there flashing at me as I go to make a comment. I'd like to address the economic development portion, the element there. And in going through this, on our last Planning Commission meeting that I went to, Mr. Bond mentioned that, or the question was brought up about the wording of some of this. And in my opinion, a lot of the wording in this is really soft and meaningless, and that it's unenforceable. It's like the city shall encourage, the city may, and none of this means anything as far as a plan is concerned. So when we talk about things trickling down from the comprehensive plan down to policy that gets made, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of this stuff just gets tossed out the door when it comes time to in the development of the plans. It also would appear in reading this, and then in my limited knowledge of the operations of the city, a lot of the plans and a lot of the things that they seem to work at cross purposes, where it's all good and fine and dandy to stand up and say, we want growth, we want new businesses, we want to do this, and we got, we need more retail income, but on the other hand, we're not going to allow you to put any signs up. We're not going to let you, put in a driveway here or there, or we're going to worry more about Tremont, when even in the plan it says that, the Bethel Sedgwick corridor is a priority, but nobody ever wants to address the Bethel corridor when Tremont is where everybody wants to do everything. And I know there's underlying factors in paying money back on that, but in reality, that's where it's at. So to wrap it up, I just want to say, lead, follow, or get out of the way when it comes to developing the Port Orchard area.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Osinski. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Home Builders Association. Thank you for having this presentation tonight. I would echo what was just said. Thank you very much. Thought that was excellent. I wanted to just touch on a couple of things very briefly. I am a little bit concerned when I look through the housing segment that there's a lot of policy time spent on emphasizing the needs of the moderate and low income housing, and there's a lot of comments in here regarding maybe possibly lower permit fees or other facilitations to help those projects go forward. I would like to emphasize and impress upon you the importance of making sure that you can get a permit in this community from the private sector, that they can come in and build market rate housing, do that affordably so that those that are creating tax revenues for the community are able to live here. At the Home Builders Association, we believe in all types of housing. We think that every job needs a place to go at night. So my comments are not to take away from the needs of the moderate to low income, but to remind you that a lot of those projects have access to federal funds and other grant dollars that the private sector cannot compete with, and they shouldn't need to. But to put those projects potentially ahead of the private sector full paying freight permits that might come in your door, I think that would be misguided, and I would encourage you to be careful about that. There's also some sort of nondescript references in here that make me sort of feel you might be going down the path of inclusionary zoning or some other types of projects that are used in other parts of the country. Just remember that when you place one type of project ahead of another, give preference, pick winners and losers, you will drive the cost up of all housing. Low-income housing, moderate housing, and market rate housing will all go up as a result of these types of schemes. So we'd really like an opportunity to talk to you about that in a little more detail. I've only just read the plan tonight, but those sorts of things cause me a little bit of concern. And at the end of the day, we want to create livable communities, generate tax dollars for the city to then use to produce the services that your citizens really want when they live here. So I think we can accomplish all of that. There are just elements of this that I'm a little bit concerned about.
Going once?
Nick, I have a,
Yeah.
I don't know if this is on. I just have a question about next Thursday. Will there be an opportunity at that meeting for public input? Or is that just Planning Commission and Council?
There can be. I think it's really up to the Planning Commission and Council, and I think going through the goals and policies, I'm not sure how much time it's going to take based on the comments or feedback that you have, and so I want to make sure that the council gets to have a say on these things, but perhaps at the end there would be time for comment, and I'm happy to put it on the agenda if that's what you like.
Well, Nick, we talked about too that the setup will be slightly different than it is here. We'll be down here in a large rectangle. Is that, you know? Where we
Yeah, we'll. I think we can get everybody around a table, but we'll have to count tables.
All right.
Just something simple, and I don't know if it is part of this, but I've been noticing, first of all, thank you for all the work that you put into this. It says residents may find leaving the car at home to be an attractive option. So we need to figure out what to do with Rockwell and Sydney and Klein. Even with all the, everything else going on, we still have that. So transportation is going to be a big thing. And then I'm a little confused about, I'm hearing there's more development out at McCormick Woods. Is that right? So they're not going to be walking, and they're doing their shopping in Gig Harbor. So we may need to consider, if we're talking about people walking to stores, McCormick Woods is not walking downtown. So I don't know if it fits or not, but that's what I'm thinking.
My name is Jerry Mischel, and I just have a question about this area that's between McCormick Woods and the city. Has there been any discussions with the county what's going to happen with that area in the future, particularly the undeveloped areas?
I guess there's two ways to answer that. I think that, and I wasn't here last time there was a discussion about having that sort of donut added to the urban growth boundary, but my understanding is the residents are pretty opposed to being incorporated into the city or an urban growth boundary. However, we did just last night talk about a proposal that the county has either received or may be receiving in the near future to add some property along Anderson Hill Road to the urban growth boundary, and so that's north of north of Old Clifton, but it's a pretty small area. It's not the whole large area. So at this point in time, I don't know what'll come of that.
Thank you. Jerry Harmon, I guess I'm going to also put in on, I like the idea of the walking, but if you'll notice in this room, there are a lot of us that are over long walking distance age. And so I think you also need to think about, I know that you have to plan for the future, but walking long distances isn't in some of our plans. And so that concept is getting a lot of push, but I'm not so sure it's appropriate for our area, especially with the hills and the distance between places.
I do have a question on my own. This is not from Loretta. I'm real curious to know whether or not the leaders of the city of Port Orchard are fully aware of what West Sound Utility District has in store for them if this bond that they're planning on issuing on the residents out there happens to default or fail. There's not enough of us out there. There's only 48 of us there for a $7 million bond. And no matter how they gerrymander this thing, if this bond fails, they're going to hit all of the ratepayers in West Sound Utility District, and it may very well spin off and hit part of Port Orchard in this. So you really need to be aware of this. The question I have also is this. Kitsap County is a rural area. I've lived in it for 40 years. It was beautiful then. How in the world are you going to expand into Kitsap County and remain rural? How can you do this, and how are you going to do it, and where are the jobs going to come from that are going to cause this great influx of population in this town and Kitsap County?
You might have been the gentleman I talked to on the phone earlier. Did you have a comment? We're wrapping up.
My name is Scott. I'm a resident of the city of Port Orchard, and I apologize, I had a schedule conflict, so I'm here at the last moment. But I wanted to talk about what I believe to be City of Port Orchard's greatest asset, which is its waterfront. And so I don't think many people would disagree with that. Of course, there's its people too. But I was a little dismayed to see that there was a used car lot that had moved further towards the center of Port Orchard downtown. And I understand that Titus Ford is also looking at moving its way closer towards the center of downtown. And I understand that's a commercial zone, but I also believe it's a commercial zone that's on our waterfront. And while I'm not sure everybody may agree what Port Orchard wants to be, I think we can agree what we don't want it to be. And maybe we don't want it to be a waterfront community that allows auto sales lots on its waterfront. So I'm hoping that during the comprehensive plan, you can look at the goals and policies of the comp plan and see whether we can look at tweaking the commercial zone, at least on the waterfront side of our downtown, and see if we still want to allow auto sales lots to perpetuate. Thank you very much.
I agree. You don't need car lots down there.
Nick, if I may, I would like to introduce one of our guests in the audience, and Mr. Hokanson is here, and he happened to be the chair of the Planning Commission when the comprehensive plan was originally developed in 1995. So, John, raise your hand. He can't hear me.
All right. Mayor, do you have anything? Last words?
No, I don't. I appreciate you taking the time to bring us up to date on what's happened in the past and what we're hoping to do in the near future. And hope everyone brings a few friends for the next meeting to hear what's going on. And to, it would be interesting if we can figure out how we can get both the professionals in the room, so to speak, the Planning Commission and the council, and citizen comments for this next one also. I'd love to see everybody participate in it. So however we can do that, it'd be a great idea to work that way, so.
Okay, we'll give it some thought. And like I said before, I think I would just encourage you, make sure you've kind of looked through some of the goals and policies of the plan specifically, and come prepared to discuss those on Thursday. So thank you for coming out, everyone, tonight. And I think this is helpful just to refresh everybody's memory of how we've gotten to the point that we're at, and where we've got to be in about a year.
Very good. Thank you.